Okay, so we're going to take a look at the FRQ from the multiple choice selection from Friday. This particular FRQ is a stabilization FRQ, and so what it's going to be asking you to do is kind of look at the consequences of the actions of either the Fed or of our government with its fiscal policy. Remember, on this particular FRQ, in letter C, there are a couple currency exchange questions. We haven't learned that yet. That's later this week, so we're not answering those. So without further ado, let's take a look at this number 1. It says a country's in short-run equilibrium, and it currently has an unemployment rate above the natural rate of unemployment. And so if our unemployment rate is above the natural rate of unemployment, that means it's greater than 5%, because the natural rate of unemployment is 5%. Now, full employment is 95%, so if we're above the natural rate of unemployment at 6, 7, 8, that means we're below full employment. And now it wants us to draw what that looks like. And so the first thing I'm going to do then is I'm going to draw us at full employment. This is an aggregate demand and aggregate supply graph, which the question is talking about using. And here's our aggregate demand, and there, this is our short-run aggregate supply. Remember, this is full employment or long-run equilibrium. I'm just going to go price 1 there. This isn't the answer, but this is our starting point. This is what we call the base graph. To show the economy then operating below full employment or with a high unemployment rate, we simply need to show the aggregate demand like so, to the left, and there's the answer to the letter A. This is the new price level, and actually that's the current price level because that's where we are, and in black is where we ought to be. And then here I'm just going to write Y1 because that's where our current output is. Remember, this equilibrium, number 2 here, that is a short-run equilibrium. And in black, this equilibrium is a long-run equilibrium, and this is where we ought to be. So for letter A, it says, using a correctly labeled graph, draw it. That's the answer to letter A. So letter B then says, assume the Federal Reserve buys bonds. So letter B says that the Federal Reserve is buying bonds. Okay, that makes sense because this is a recession and we want to use expansionary policy, so now they're trying to solve the recession. Letter B says, assume the Fed buys bonds in the open market, what will happen to nominal interest rates? So when in doubt, graph it out. Nominal interest rates are located on the money market graph. And so I'm going to write the whole thing out there. Nominal interest. We have money supply and we have money demand quantity in Q1. So what happens to nominal interest rates when the Fed buys bonds? In order to solve this, remember the result of the action. If the Fed buys bonds, what that means is that the money supply is going to increase. When money supply increases, we draw it by shifting it to the right. To the right, MS2. And look, what has happened to our nominal interest rates? They have gone where? Down. And that was the initial rate. Here is the new one. I'm going to write I2. Nominal interest rates have gone down. So your answer for B1, what will happen to nominal interest rates? Nominal interest rates will decrease. And if it said explain or show, you could use this graph to explain or show. Or a sentence would do it. B2, explain the impact of the reduction in interest on aggregate demand. And so B2 is really one of the main concepts that we've been studying all along. When you look at it like this, what we say is buying bonds is going to cause the money supply to increase. Money supply increasing is going to cause interest rates to go down. When interest rates go down, this is when things like investment go up, or we have said interest sensitive consumption go up. This is that long linking statement, but I'm running a little out of space, so I'm just putting it on multiple lines. And when this happens, if investment or consumption go up, then that causes aggregate demand to go up. And I think I'm off the edge of the camera when I do that. So these cause aggregate demand to go up. And so B2 says, explain the impact of the reduction of interest rates and aggregate demand. This is what you'd say. By buying bonds, they increase money supply, which causes interest rates to go down. That then will make investment or interest-sensitive consumption go up, which leads to aggregate demand going up. And so that's your answer to B2. B3 says, illustrate the impact of the reduction in interest rates on the aggregate demand graph you drew in A. This is funny, because when we do all that, what's that going to do? It's going to make aggregate demand do what? It's going to make it shift to the right. So all you have to do is show that it's going to shift to the right. Those arrows are your answer to B3. And then finally, letter C says, given the impact on price level in B3, and the price level in B3, remember B3 was draw these arrows. So price level means it went up, correct? So what happens to real interest rates? And so for that question, then I'm going to need to squeeze a little space. This is the letter C. They want to know what happens to real interest as a result of this. The answer is you have to use the Fischer formula. Remember, nominal, oops, that was a backwards, and I don't know why I did that. Nominal minus the rate of inflation equals real. If nominal minus the rate of inflation equals real, then here's what we know. As a result of the action, price level is going to increase because it's going to shift aggregate demand to the right. So price level is going to go up. We see that there. If price level goes up, we call that inflation. So nominal, let's just pretend it was 3. Let's say the rate of inflation used to be 1. I'm just making that up. And that meant that the real interest rate would have been historically 2. Just making that up. But we have price level going up. That means inflation went up. That means our 3 is now, instead of -1, it's going to be like -2, for example, which means the real interest rate has gone down. Whenever we experience inflation, the real number will go down because nominal stuck in the short run, nominal minus the rate of inflation equals real. And that is the answer to the FRQ from Friday's assignment.